we'll take a few minutes for announcements and let people join, continue to join. I want to welcome you to our August virtual post meeting, and we'll begin here momentarily. We are recording the session so that if you have to drop off, or if some of your colleagues are not able to join, they can view it for playback later. So I want to remind everyone to please keep your microphone on mute until the Q&A session. And Lindsay? Is Lindsay still on? If you would like, okay. If you would like a PDH certificate for this, you can just send an email to Lindsay Edwards at cardnogs.com. Her information is on the screen. Oh, there she is. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, sorry, I needed to unmute myself from multiple points on Teams. So apologize, I was speaking and no one could hear me. But yes, so I'm VP of Scholarship, Education, and STEM for our post. So if you would like credit for your continuing education, please just send me an email requesting one. And also your name needs to be indicated a specific way. Sometimes it doesn't match the way people's emails come through. So please indicate how you want your name presented on the certificate, and I'd be happy to get one back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. And now I'd like to introduce Margaret Burcham to talk about some of our upcoming events.
So thanks, Cherise. Good morning, everybody. I'm dialing in today from Arlington, Virginia. And I am the VP for programs, both government and industry. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what are our upcoming events. So, of course, we have today's program. We generally try to do a program the third Thursday of every month, but it might vary depending on speaker availability. Next month is going to be special. Instead of having a traditional speaker come in, we're going to have the golf outing to for the scholarships. And Ken Staley, would you speak about that a little bit, please?
Yes, thank you, Margaret, and good morning, everyone. So this is Ken Staley, and let's see, the SAME Semi Rhein-Main Scholarship Golf Outing is scheduled for September 11th. Sorry, I was hearing some music, or I was hearing music.
Somebody's not muted. They're off. Yeah.
Okay, great. So anyway, the outing is scheduled for September 11th. We've had a great change of events in the last 48 hours. I'm not sure if it's because work is slow at present or everyone is anxious to get out after months of quarantine and isolation. But we bounced from 10 persons signed up to over 30. So I want to say thank you to a number of the persons on the call. I don't think Joe Copeland was on the call, but I want to thank him in particular. Buchard Horn also had signed up recently, and past thanks to Black and Veatch and to Cardno as well. So a couple quick items. Don't forget, our items typically include a theme or outfit of choice, each year. And this year, the theme is the Roaring Twenties, and that is in celebration of 100 years of SAME. Please also note that all the proceeds for this outing go to the college scholarship program and student summer camps. So you have about 1.5 weeks to sign up, and we look forward to seeing you out there. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ken. And can you go back to the program slide, Cherise? Yeah, thanks. So like Ken had mentioned, we are in the centennial year of SAME. And so each post wanted to have one of their events specifically focused on that fact. And so, thanks. So the 29th of October event will be we've delayed since the original date, which was in March 19th, I think it was, to celebrate 100 years of Germany and USA partnership since the ending of World War I, the crossing of the Rhine, and so here in Germany. And so we've arranged for Dr. Sprenger from Mainz University to join us. And the reason we did put this off since March is because Dr. Sprenger has a whole lot of collection of items that he wants to be able to show you in person, and that's part of his very interesting talk. So a little bit harder to do that virtually. So he's gonna be in person. This will be in Wiesbaden at the dining facility on Clay Kaserne. But what we are going to do, since we've had such good luck with these virtual events, we are going to do our best to also have that event available to people to dial in and hear it as well. Maybe they won't see all the items quite the same, but still get a flavor of the history. So hope you'll be able to attend that event. I'm sure it'll be quite interesting. Okay, and then back to the event slide. I'll also say out into November, we haven't confirmed the date yet, but we believe it's going to be our regular date. We have a very esteemed fire protection engineer expert for here in Germany. Timo Weidner works for Krebs and Kiefer, and he has had extensive experience integrating both the UFCs and the German codes on numerous projects for USACE. So this is something of great importance these days. I think we can all learn from it, and I'm really excited to have him come enlighten us all a little bit on that subject. So, so that's kind of what's coming up over the next few months. I also want to point out that we have a sister post in Kaiserslautern, and they are going to have a golf tournament this month. You can still sign up and support them if you would like, and we are going to try more and more to bring our two groups together so we can benefit from each other and what they know. So, and then finally, I always want to mention that there's an SAME International Community of Interest. There's several of those, but there's of communities of interest, but there's one international which should relate to all of us international type people. And they have several events coming up. They're all virtual, so they're easy to join, and you see some of them there. And I encourage you to jump in whenever you can. It's a great group of people there, and I associate with them often and learn all kinds of good tidbits for, that work. So with all that, that's kind of our program coming up. And what I would like to do next is to turn it back to Charisse to talk a little bit about our sponsors.
Mike Urbach, I'd like to let you talk about this. Thanks.
Thank you, Charisse. Hello, my name is Michael Urbach. I'm the VP of Sustaining Individual Memberships, and we want to take the time to thank our 31 sustaining members for their continued support of our post. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, Margaret, I'll let you introduce our presentation.
Before we go on, can we talk one more moment about the sustaining members?
Yeah.
And when you, there's a big benefit if your company is a sustaining member like mine is, and Michael Urbach's, because what that does for you is it allows each of, I think, 6 people in the firm to belong to 6 different posts, and all different ones. So 6 people can cover most of the different posts, I would think. So that is a neat benefit because you're really learning a lot from the other posts. And then you may not know this, but each individual member is allowed to and encouraged to be affiliated with 3 different posts. So for instance, Charisse, you want to explain how you are, or you have joined?
Oh, well, certainly. Yeah, my primary membership, obviously, is the Rhein-Main post, but I'm also a member of the Kaiserslautern post and the San Antonio post, because San Antonio is kind of my home base. So yeah, you're allowed to affiliate with three posts every individual member can do that, and you just update your member profile on the website. If you have questions about how to do that, you can get in touch with me or Mike Urbach, and we can either talk you through it, or we can have the folks at SAME National assist you with that.
Good, thanks, Cherise. And I say that because I only learned this fact yesterday.
Yeah,
so I haven't gone in my profile yet and done that affiliation, but I intend to do that. And I just think, why not? The more, the merrier. So, and Kaiserslautern would obviously be a good one for those of us that are close to the Rhein-Main post.
Well,
Okay.
and we actually have callers on today that are in the Kaiserslautern area. So
Excellent.
All right, I'm going to
Okay.
stop there, and Margaret, I'll let you introduce our presenter today.
Yep. So we are very fortunate to have Larry Tabor with us today, and Larry's going to show his face so you know who's going to be speaking. He might not stay on long. He's out in a field office, and the connection isn't quite as good there, so he might freeze up. But I just want to introduce him real quickly. So Larry's a senior structural engineer. He's with Black & Veatch Federal Business, and Larry has 19 years of experience in structural design and is in detailing, in addition to taking on several long-term field assignments. He's the kind of go-to guy that'll go out and take on those hard jobs. We all have one in every company, and he likes those challenging construction projects. He's been worldwide with them. His project roles in the field have included lead inspector, resident engineer, structural superintendent, and field structural engineer. Aside from being an active SAME member, Larry's also a fellow of the American Concrete Institute, where he's currently chairing the Concrete Curing Committee and serving on 7 other committees. He is a past vice president of the Kansas City American Concrete Institute chapter and a past president of the Missouri chapter of the same organization. And he also has several awards to his credit. He's licensed in 4 states and has both a bachelor's and a master's in civil structural engineering. So the fun fact about Larry is that he can perform what's called mirror writing, which means that he can write backwards. And once in college, he had the audacity to submit a calculus assignment in that manner. So what I want to know, though, Larry, is what happened? What did the teacher say?
So I had presented to, I've been working with this professor in the past, so it wasn't a horrible surprise for him. But he was like, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And I said, "Just hold it up to him. Just hold it up to a mirror, up to the light." So I got good marks on the presentation. So
You
was
survived. Great.
Yeah, left-handers tend to be. I'm left-handed, and left-handers tend to be more apt to be able to do that. Leonardo da Vinci is a famous presenter that was able to do that. So I'm going to.
So I haven't had a chance to take a complete poll, but there are an awful lot of engineers who are left-handed. So there must be something to that.
It's much more common than most people think.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. With that, Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you, and really looking forward to what you have to say.
Okay, I'm waiting for my screens to finish doing something. Just a second here. Somehow. Tell me, we're just gonna, for some reason my screen is good, but we're just go with that. Okay, something happened with my screens. Okay, so welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. Did we just lock up? No.
I can hear you okay.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
My mouse is locked up here. So sorry, like I said, I'm on a shared Wi-Fi connection with about 50 people, so 40 people. All right, let me skip through some of this fairly fast. I will warn you, there's a lot of information in here. There's actually probably more than I will actually touch on. That's intentional. This is meant to be something that you can take with you later on and take a look at it and use it as you're planning maybe your inspection investigation in future years. You may not need everything, but hopefully there's pieces and parts that you'll take out of that. A few general thoughts. The topic is pretty broad, and I certainly cannot hit on everything. It's just too big of a topic. But it's a good topic. I think it's very practical. The topic does spread across to new construction as well. The focus is really more investigations and things where you're going not to an active construction site, but it does add, new construction to a lot of carryover. This presentation is based on my experience, so I've got quite a bit of it. So the way I do things, though, may not be the way the others do things. Everybody's got a good war story, and so obviously there's going to be questions at the end if you got a good war story or a good thing to add to it. Like I said, I'm going to show you how I do it, but other people can learn some more stuff. And as I say, new escapees can pick up much more. But then at the same time, I do hope that even people who have been out of the office quite a bit can pick up some stuff. 6, this is somewhat, it applies more than just investigations, but at the same time for investigations it applies specifically. One thing, safety above all else, okay? This is Black & Veatch. I know who I work for is a very safe company. Most companies that I've ever worked with have all been safe, internationally even. And I mean, sometimes you go to sites and you just question whether or not maybe they have the same standards that you do. However, generally they do, and everyone really actually does want a safe site. Gone are the days of rogue. Let's go just jump in a hole. Let's go do this. Let's whatever. Those days are gone. Liabilities and everything else are just too much. Nobody wants to get anybody hurt. Everybody wants to go home as happy and healthy as they arrived. So please be safe. If you learn nothing else, be safe. Make sure to get your PPE, your protection gear. So obviously we try to design a safe site. We try to plan things in, try to put barricades up, things like that. However, in existing sites, particularly, especially older sites, what you'll find is you're more reliant on your PPE and your awareness. PPE is supposed to be a last line of defense on a new construction site, but yet on existing investigations, it tends not to be. It tends to be the primary protection that you have. One warning is if you're OCONUS, you can sometimes have difficulty getting the proper gear. So you may be able to find, let's say, a hard hat, for instance, but maybe it doesn't quite meet what you normally would want to have. If you have to shift stuff, if you have access to the FPO or APO system, that's great. But if you don't, then sometimes it takes extra time. So something to think about. Also, training. Do not wait to get your safety training. Too many times I've been involved in investigations where people come up to me and said, "Ooh, we're going into confined space." Yeah. And I said, "Yes." "Oh, I'm not trained." Uh-oh. So now I got to go get them training, and that takes time, and usually time is short when you're doing investigations. My main point is don't skimp. Don't waste your time and your dollars doing other things. If you have to do safety first. Safety is first. Okay. All right, this is my reality check. First and foremost, you'll see a guy on the right side of the screen there. His name's Matt Kosman. He's a fellow structural engineer with me, works for Black & Veatch. You'll see him in several of the slides, so I do point out him. The reason why he's got a lot of pictures of him in here is because I'm the one taking the picture, so you'll see a lot of pictures of him throughout the presentation. Your freedom does come at a price. I'm here to tell you. I've been the late nights where I just get back from a presentation an investigation rather, and I got some other project guy calling me up going, "Hey, I emailed you. Where's you at? What's this?" At the same time, I just got done with the investigation, and at the same time, they want the report. Right? As soon as you get the field work done, they want the answer. So other stuff doesn't go away. Budgets are reduced. You're going to have stressors, and that's the price you pay in a way. But at the same time, I think it's worth it. Personally, to me, this is the most engineering you can get. I mean, we're problem solving here. We're looking at true engineering issues. You're trying to figure out, why is the concrete cracking a certain way? Why is the valves on the piping not working? How do we upgrade this system? You take a 1930s piping system and somebody wants to not rip it all out. They want to use it, but yet you got to bring it up to current codes when you start messing with something. Or, how do you change and make an electrical system work? What's your problems? So problem solving skills, a lot of this stuff is true engineering. I do put the warning on here just because I've seen it. I've taken a lot of new young people out, especially, and people that just haven't been in the field a lot. And I always keep an extra close eye on them for several things. One of them is I do a lot of work at heights. So you can see, Matt's in a harness right there. Obviously, no concerns over working at heights for him. But people do have that issue, and that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Or claustrophobia as well is another common one. So I would do a lot of confined space entries where I'm in a dark hole that's water dripping on me, and it doesn't bother me. But some people it does. Trust me, there's plenty of work out there do not put yourself in a position where you're going to have problems. It's just not worth it. It's too much danger. At the same time, technical. When I first started out, I went out with a couple of people, and I admit, when I walked and looked at some of the, and I was doing a lot of pure structural stuff, not broadening my skills beyond structural at the time. And I would look at some concrete walls or something, and I'd see a crack, and I could tell it was a crack, but I didn't know why that crack was there. And the key thing is to understanding when something is truly a problem versus when it's just, that's concrete crack kind of thing. So you want to make sure that if you don't have the technical expertise, that's fine, but recognize your limits and go seek help. Don't answer a question if you're not sure the answer. All right. So the other item is, I say investigation, often called assessments, inspections, planning, studies, observations. They go by different names. In general, I'm talking about a project that you are going to an existing site. Things already happened. They're already built, whether it was built 2 years ago, 2 months ago, or 20 years ago, or even 100 years ago. You're going out and you're doing something. It's a very focused item. So you're not spending months and months on the site. You're spending anywhere from half a day, a couple hours, to a couple days, to maybe even a couple weeks, that kind of thing. Communication. This should be on a slide probably in every presentation I ever give, but when you're doing investigations, it's extremely important for many different reasons. I will tell you that I have seen a lot of problems come about because people didn't talk. So you want to talk to your client before you get on site, all the other stakeholders. There are many different stakeholders in this stuff, right? You want to talk before you get on site to catch any last minute changes. When you first get there, of course. And then during your investigation, there's going to be a lot of people around you. Usually you have kind of the looky-loos and the strap hangers, and you want to make sure that A, they're not getting themselves in danger, and B, that they're not getting in your way. You want to communicate with your team properly. If you're seeing something that your client might need to know about immediately, you want to communicate that. And then, of course, like I said, with your team to be safe. And then I always recommend to hold, if you have time, of course, and generally you try to plan this, I recommend holding what I call a wrap-up meeting. And basically that is just a quick debrief. You're not giving any answers. You're not saying, this is what I saw and everything. It's just, hey, here's kind of some things to think about. Here's what the direction I'm headed. If there's something major, maybe bring it up. But what it does is it helps with some rumor control and it settles nerves. People are often nervous. They see some face that they don't know why they're there, and rumors get started. At some point, oh my God, the building's going to fall down. I was once on a project and we were there for about a week, and about the 4th or 5th day, we got an elevator, and I was with my client, and somebody else got in the elevator, and they didn't know who was the other people standing with my client, and they said, "Oh yeah," and I think his name was Bob. And Bob, I hear we got major problems in the elevators. The guy was fearful of getting on the elevators, and it's only because the day prior we literally were just doing some checking the seismic switches and some other things for non-structural components evaluations that we were doing on that project, and we were on the elevators, climbing up and down, everything like that. There wasn't actually anything wrong with the elevators, but somebody saw people working on the elevators, so must have been a problem with the elevators. And also during the reporting phase, because you don't want to give a report that they're expecting completely something different and they all of a sudden get disappointed or get surprised. Surprises are not a good thing. All right, so I am currently on slide 10, scopes and budget, if you're listening on the phone. All right, scopes. They can be a problem. Let's just put it that way. If many times you're asked to assist, many times you're not. So if you're not asked to assist developing a scope ahead of time and it's already written for you, you can sometimes make minor course corrections, shift the path a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. You can do that. And that's, again, communication. That's a good thing. However, there are times where this client says, I got a problem. I don't know what I need to do, but I got a problem. And so you can help them write the scope. This is more popular in the non-federal world than in the federal world, from my experience, but at the same time, it does happen on both sides. They have a problem, they just don't know what to do about it. They know they have a problem, but they don't know what to do. So I recommend breaking the task down into scope down into various tasks. It tends to help be in more organized scope, number one. And number two, it helps when there's changes later and a particular problem, your whole scope doesn't go to waste. It's just one little part. So you definitely, in specific tasks is always a good thing. You usually have a preliminary work kind of task, an actual investigation task, maybe with some subtasks, and then you have a reporting phase task at a minimum is usually, and you usually have an administration task, and that's down there on the second to last bullet. The people in the home office don't work for free. So just keep an eye out towards what the scope's going to be costing. Cost can balloon fast, and I'm here to tell you very fast. So always have ideas when you offer up $100,000 scope and the client says, geez, I got 20,000. What can we do? And maybe okay, you drop out some people, you don't do half the investigation, they don't get certain things, but have a backup. Okay. And then sometimes especially when you're given a vague scope, sometimes the scopes just aren't good. And it was written by somebody who's not done the actual work but just wants the answer. So ask questions. Again, communication. Waiting until you get to the site or even after the site investigation is really bad, because at that point you're on the back of the power curve. You're not asking ahead of time where you can make changes and where everybody's on board. Instead, you're almost trying to come up with a reason why it can look like you're coming up with a reason why you can do, instead of saying on the front end, hey, I think this is a concern here, let's talk about this. Maybe we don't have to do it this way. The client obviously needs something, and that is important, by the way. Figure out if they're spending money. Most people don't just spend money just to spend money. I mean, unless we're talking, September 29th and they got to spend it before the end of the fiscal year. Most times they don't want to just spend money. So why do they want to spend the money? And focus on that. Answer the questions that they're going to ask you. At the same time, there's a lot of questions that you need to ask, because it will adjust your time and your budget and your price. So when it's rushed, clarity suffers. That's just a common statement. Okay. I recommend doing lots of conference calls, emails, video chats, things like that. That all works well. And then suck the information dry out of previous satellite images, Google phone photos, things like that. We'll get into more of this later, but work to get as much information you can to write a good scope. Scopes do also creep. So when things are found on the inspections, you tend to, as an engineer particularly, you want to do the extra good for the client, and you want to go that extra mile, and you get curious. Bluntly, we're trained and taught to be curious, and that is a good thing within a little bit of bounds. So sometimes it's good client service. Sometimes it helps you find the true answer to maybe truly what the problem is. Again, if you see a crack, it's just a crack, but then maybe you start digging further and you find out, oh, it's the shape of it is diagonal, the location of it, golly, that's a shear crack, or that's just a shrinkage crack, not a big deal. So some of that is fine. But if all of a sudden they want you to inspect an entire another building, for example, while you're on site, you think you could take a look at this thing over here? If you have time and you can work it as a supplemental service, that's fine. But at the same time, understand, your time is money and your time is valuable. So you want to try to limit that, be diplomatic and do a little bit or whatever. It's a good example for doing a little bit. I was once down in a clear well for a reservoir, and, the client, I'm down there checking things out, measuring stuff and all that. And the client hollers down there and goes, hey, do you think you could take some measurements? And I was like, sure, about what measurements? He goes, the tank size. We're like, what? They had literally never been in this tank, and it's literally it was built in 1940s during the World War II as a USACE project, actually. The entire plant had one drawing, by the way, one drawing for the entire plant. It's interesting, but you sit there and you look at this, and you're like, how can you not have drawings and measurements? And they didn't. So, but it took me an extra 10, 15 minutes to go and take and, okay, well, this is 100 by 100, your column spacing is 20 by 20 or something, and whatever it was. And that's considered good client service. They got a nice little thing out of it. I later did a little CAD drawing as part of my report for them, and I guarantee they're now using that, and it's good. So that's a good example. But when it's an entire other thing, you want to avoid that. All right, cost. Like I said, investigations do typically have smaller price tags compared to brand new work. So because of that, when you make changes, that has a larger percentage of impact. Normally the actual site investigation time is a quarter of your cost. It's small normally because your report time and sometimes your preparation even is high. Usually your biggest cost is normally in the report, especially if you got to do analysis, design, things like that. So because of that, you want to think about what type of report might be required. A technical memorandum, technical memo, or tech memo, sometimes it's called, they're perfectly fine usually. If it's a specific problem, somebody just wants, I just need an answer to a specific item. You don't need to go down to all this level of detail in some cases. Now, in other cases, though, you need everything. And sometimes that's because they need the documentation to back up a different argument. Sometimes it's just because it's truly that complex. And sometimes it's a regulatory thing. So I do a lot of hydropower Tainer gate and spillway gate inspections. And there's both USACE, FERC, different organizations have different requirements, but there's something called a Part 12, for instance, on FERC, and it's every 10 years you got to go do a full inspection, has to have full analysis, has to all this stuff, and there's very specific things that has to get looked at. So in that case there, it's already dictated to you. But in other cases, a client calls you up and says, hey, there's a bent beam over here, and I don't know if it's a problem or not. And so I can go and I can look and say, okay, well, that's a steel beam. It's bent. Yeah, why is it bent? Okay, this. And that's a 3 or 4 page memo. That's not a big deal. All right. In terms of that, don't forget your baggage fees, tools. They can add a lot if you're Oconus and you're flying Ryanair or Wizz Air, for instance, because every bag you check adds a bunch of costs. So don't forget about that. And then the last thing I would say on this slide is payment. Most of the time you'll find the payments in US dollars or euros, and that's perfectly fine, but sometimes it's not. I currently work in Poland, and sometimes they want to get paid in Polish zloty. Well, the Polish zloty rate tends to fluctuate more than, say, the euro or the dollar. And depending upon which way it's swinging, that's going to help or hurt you. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that. All right, so slide 15 is the preliminary office activities. So what do you do before you actually even just, you got somebody called you up, said, we want an inspection, we want an investigation. What do we do? All right, so normally time's short. So because time's short, I'm going to start your to-do list for you. Generally, you want to first start thinking about your assessment forms, your safety, gathering tools, logistics, things like that. You also need to be thinking about applicable codes and standards. So what type of job is this? If it's a government job, you got to pull up the UFCs. Is it a USACE job? You want to get the engineering manuals, the EMs, because different jobs. So for example, I go back to my Tainer gate and hydropower, USACE has its own inspection guide, if you will. It's an EM, and they want their terminology, their load standards, their load cases, everything done a certain way. Then you go to the private side of things, and now FERC doesn't have those standards, and they're a little bit more open. So actually, I tend to lean back over to the USACE side of things and use that just because it's a really good industry document. But at the same time, you need to make sure that FERC's going to be happy, because in their world, they're king. So if they don't like something, you will redo it, and so you got to be a little careful with that. Safety activity hazard analysis, AHAs. They are needed to be done even if it's not a normal construction site. This is, and we'll get more into this later, but do not forget to do that. Okay, that's something that, because we don't want anybody to get hurt, and you're on your own, generally as an investigation, you're not out with a bunch of other people, like you got a small team, that becomes even more important. Okay. All right, next slide, 17, is building a solid foundation. So like I say, prep, and communicate is the 2 biggest things you're going to do to have a good, successful investigation. Typically, investigations are short notice. I've been as much as, it's rare, but it does happen where I've literally gotten a phone call one night. It was at 5 o'clock at night, and I was on a plane 6:30 next morning. That was an emergency situation. They had a landslide, and some powerhouses were down, losing millions of dollars a day. So they needed to go forth really fast. But it's not uncommon to have only a couple of weeks or a week, and quickly you need to get your logistics done. You need to get your airline tickets booked, because if you're putting a budget in and you budget for buying a ticket 2 weeks out versus a ticket the next day, your ticket price just doubled or tripled. So that gets important, and it can blow your budget pretty fast. Also for safety, especially if you have to get additional training or any things. So you definitely want to be thinking about safety and logistics first. And then at that point, you move on to snag as much information as you possibly can. You want to work with old files, work with your client. Google Earth, Google Maps will get you good views of a lot of things. Bing does still have its bird's eye. It's a little bit harder to find, but you got to work with a little bit. But bird's eye is nice because it's a little bit lower level. Think like airplane flying over the site. It's amazing what you can find on news articles, by the way. The news articles, like fishermen, they're out fishing on a dam, for instance. It's amazing what you can find there. Definitely set realistic goals for your investigation on the pace. I personally used to be way more over optimistic, and then I found that what I thought I was going to get done in a day would not, I was struggling. So, you got to spread it out just a little bit more. Okay. And as I said before, review some codes and standards because updates do happen. You want to make sure you get the latest and greatest. As an example, I've done I do a lot of non-structural inspections of non-structural equipment for seismic and check it's still okay. And with that, there's some newer codes that came out, and I tell you, we were literally headed to a presentation or to an investigation once, and they updated the newest code, and it came out. And luckily, we were kind of grandfathered in underneath the old stuff because it had just come out. But that could have been a problem because we would have been inspecting to the wrong thing. So definitely check that. Other things you might want to do, I stress the top one, analysis. There may be times where doing a little bit of preliminary stuff can help identify critical locations. So an example is on a Tainer gate, spillway gate, for example. Maybe certain areas are already sitting here at 80-90% utilization on their strength. Well, okay, go look at those areas first because let's say they have some mild corrosion, whereas another spot may only be down at 10 or 15% stressed and they've got bigger corrosion problems. Well, yeah, it's got bigger corrosion problems, but it's not highly stressed, so it can absorb that, it can take that, it's not a big problem. Whereas something else that's a critical member, especially if it's a mission critical member or what they call a fracture critical in our world sometimes, meaning if it were to fail, the gate goes downstream, that kind of thing. You really want to look at those spots, access, equipment, that kind of thing. Okay, so we talked about safety analysis. It does go by different names. If you get out in the non-government world, it tends to go by a job hazard analysis or JHA. In the government world, it tends to be called an activity hazard analysis, AHA, or AHA, sometimes referred to as. For USACE, EM385 is the one that covers that. Host nation standards, by the way, do differ. I currently am in Poland, and I will tell you, for the most part, our standards, meaning OSHA, EM385, our US standards, and the Polish norms, what they call norms, which are their standards, generally jive, but not always. And because it's not always, you got to be a little careful. And we tend to use the most strict. That's just kind of the project rules. Okay, use the most strict. So as an example, for American codes, when you're climbing a ladder, 20 feet. You go 20 feet without using a harness. Okay, that's standard OSHA normal rules. However, you get to Poland and it's 4 meters. 4 meters is a little over basically 12 feet. So there's a case where, like, for instance, on the site that I'm currently at, which is not an investigation, it's an actual normal new construction site, but where we have a ladder that's 4.7 meters tall. So for American rules, we would need a harness, but for Polish rules, we do. So we're using a harness to climb the ladder. And some companies, by the way, have also limited their stuff. So for Black & Veatch, for instance, if it's a job that we are in charge of site safety, we also limit it to 12 feet. We don't do the 20 feet. We limit it to 12 feet, which is actually more in line with Polish standards. But basically, the safety analysis helps you think through the process. You want to start it early enough, and you want to discuss it with your team and with your managers, usually also with your safety manager, to make sure, and then you get signatures, which I'll talk about that more in just a second. But it does help you identify your rescue plans, any gaps in your knowledge. I can't tell you the number of times, because hydropower tends to be out in the middle of nowhere. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been where there is no cell coverage. I tend to find the places on the globe where there are no cell coverage. And what that means is you can't call for help. Or if you can, they're going to be a half an hour, 2 hours away. Okay, the worst I've ever been is 2 hours away from nearest place where you had cell phone coverage. In that case there, we had to have the local rescue team on standby with radios that were tied to landlines and helicopters that we could call on to get rescued if need be. And we even took it to the point where the guy that had the frequencies of who to call, he told us, hey, if something were to happen to me, then call this number because something could have happened to them. So you got to think about that. Quite often, fire departments or the base rescue groups, they love to use you guys for practice. You're kind of the only thing going on site that day, and they need to have so much annual practice, and yours counts. So more than once, I've had them kind of hang around watching me doing confined space entry, for example, and then when I'm done with my inspection, they say, hey, can we go train? And what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll put a dummy somewhere in the tank, for instance, and then they'll go find the dummy and haul it out as a training exercise. And it not only is good community relations and good for the client and everything like that, but also you get something because they're there helping you, rescuing you if you need be, as well as they're getting something. So something to talk to them about. You're also identifying any gaps in your knowledge. So many times on spillways, getting to the spot is the problem. So you need to make sure that you can get to a spot, for example. Too many times, too many people look at a drawing and they'll see a drawing of this area and go, oh yeah, I need to investigate that area. And they don't understand you got to be able to get to that area. So how do you get to that area? Sometimes it's climbing a ladder. Is the ladder rusted and corroded? Is there a lock on the door? Is there a gate? What do you got? Okay, if you got an HA, this is an HA, pretty common if you're in the government world. Won't spend too much time on it, but basically there's a risk assessment code that you assign to basically every different step that you've got to do. You get enough higher extremes, then you raise your code. If it's a low, then you get a low risk. I will tell you that I rarely see L's. Generally, most people err on the side of caution and they go to M. So I have seen that. And basically what that is designed to do is just kind of get you some awareness and raise your eyebrows a bit. Other times you'll just get a pre-planning checklist, which contains the aspects of a JHA. This is one Black & Veatch uses just as an example. And they have various pieces of information here. You can see it on the screen. That's on slide 21 for those on the phone. General description, contact information, work description, things like that. And then you get into the medical safety stuff, which tends to be where the nearest hospital is at, a map to the hospital. If you hear an alarm go off, what is that alarm? Is it just a loud shrill? Is it commonly if you're on a dam site, for instance, you're in a valley somewhere and I've worked on a couple sites where we were below like Mount St. Helens, for instance, in the CONUS work on Washington State. And, the joke, but it was true, but the joke was the mountain blows, you run downhill. If the dam blows, you run uphill. And, they actually had two different whistles, two different sounds, where if the dam went, you went up. If the mountain went, you went down. So it does happen. You need to understand what they mean. Otherwise, you're going to be standing there with a dumb look on your face while your guy that's supporting you is running away and you're going, hey, what are you doing? Other things is, what's the medical response time? If you're more than 5 minutes, you have to have a CPR trained person on your crew. If you're less than 5 minutes, it's not necessarily required, although I personally always recommend it. And then what type of hazards you have, what are you mitigating it with, what kind of PPE you got, any special required training, which we'll get to in a minute, and any other checklists, things like that. One of the more important things I'm going to say is team member signatures. I want my team members to sign on the dotted line that they read the scope. Okay, they understand. A, it helps keep them accountable, but B, then I know that they have taken the duty to take their health and safety in their own hands. I'm going to watch out for them, but I want them to take personal responsibility as well. All right, what type of checklist can you have? You can have way too many. This is just a few of them, very common ones. And I do say be flexible but reasonable. And the reason why you want to be flexible, reasonable, I could put a checklist on how to get out of a car. Okay, it's just, that's overkill. But I definitely want a checklist on things like confined spaces, hot work permits, lead disturbance, hazardous materials, lockout, tagout, things like that. For confined spaces, that's one that I tend to stress. Not only many years ago, back I think in the 80s, Black & Veatch did have a fatality from confined spaces, but people, just as a general statement, die every year going in a hole that they didn't realize was a confined space. Atmospheric changes occur rapidly sometimes, and there are places where you would not think is a confined space, but actually is. Now, there are something called non-permit required confined spaces. That's one where you don't think there's an atmospheric problem, but yet it's just not a space that's normally designed for human occupancy. But there are other places that truly can kill you. So do not jump in the hole. Stop and think. Okay. Lockout, tagout. That's another item that can get you in trouble for many different reasons, actually. But one is obviously the basic is we want to keep you safe. We want to lock stuff out, any hazardous energy. A lot of people think, oh, there's a power panel, I'm going to lock it out. True, yes, absolutely, thank you. But did you also know about those valves? Or if you got a gate, a hydraulic gate, that if it opened has a 4-foot diameter pipe with 300 feet of seawater behind you. Things like that. Elevated things that are heavy, cranes, for example. So don't forget to think about all the different sources of energy. Okay. Things to look out for and to ask the questions I point out here on the slides. And they come up because lockout, tagout is something that the the procedures tend to vary depending upon where you are and who you're working with and things like that. So for example, you show up to one site with USACE, they require you to put your lock on their stuff to make sure that you personally are safe and you're taking responsibility for yourself. You show up to another client, typically a private client, and they say, you will not stick anything on my stuff. We will do it for you, and you will follow our program, and here's some training you have to take. That happens all the time. So you want to find out what the program is, who does what, who's responsible for stuff, is there any training? And then I put the second to last one on there because it's happened to me. I'm up in literally 45 minutes from the nearest civilization, and I'm hanging off of a dam doing an inspection, and all of a sudden the crew reads down to me and goes, "Hey, we need to get you up here." I'm like, "Why?" Because we need to be downstream here in about an hour, and we got to be down there because in their union, and they had to clock out at a specific time. So I had literally 5 minutes left to work before I was going to be done for the entire inspection, and I had to come back the next day to finish up that 5 minutes of work because they could not stay an extra 5 minutes because their union rules required them to leave. So things to ask about. Okay. Let me go back. What remote operation capabilities are there? That is, by the way, another one because that can get you in trouble. So just because you locked out a local control doesn't mean that somebody upstream with some SCADA system can't flip the switch. So ask about that too. Slide 24, flexible assessment forms. Everybody's got their different assessment forms. Some people don't have any forms, and that's perfectly fine too. I personally have tried to develop one that's fairly flexible, and being blunt, I don't use an actual form during the inspection a lot. I tend to write more notes and videos and things like that, which I'll get into later. But at the same time, I tend to have an inspection form that I also do fill out because it helps. It's a good, concise way to present it, and it works great for reports. So what I tend to do is at the top, obviously the information, and then I kind of give an overall asset gradation code. It's somewhat opinionated. It's somewhat just my general gut feel. It does have some basis in what I'm seeing. And then at the same time, I go some general remarks, that, hey, there's a big old crack over here, but the rest of it's fine, whatever. Whereas then I go into specific items, and the specific items really can help you later if you're talking retrofits, or you need to give something to the operations staff or the crew that's going to be at the base or wherever. So if it's simple things like, for example, on this one here, I say bird screen on roof bent, partially removed. Okay, that's an easy thing to fix. So the staff can go fix that, but it's something they probably weren't aware of. And if they're aware of it, maybe they'll go fix it. And then there's other things. So I tend to have item descriptions, and then I give what benefit would it serve to fix this or to do something. The reason why I give this is it helps the more mid or upper level managers justify why to spend money on corrections and retrofits later. So if it's an operational improvement, okay, an operational improvement is not a safety concern. It's not anything currently a problem, but if it helps later on, that's good. Whereas if you have a safety hazard, removal safety hazard probably is a higher level of concern, and so it can get a little bit more attention, especially if you're talking about spending capital money versus maintenance money, O&M maintenance money. Because in the private world, particularly your O&M money versus your capital improvement projects are turned and paid by ratepayers, whereas O&Ms are not. Logistics, like I said, getting there can be a challenge some days, especially when you're 2 hours outside of cell phone coverage and you got to get the code to a gate. It's happened to me. We got literally actually, I've been a different story. I've been to one site where we showed up and that my government guy was riding in the same car as me. We had a special approval to do that, but just because the site was so far away, got there and he forgot his keys. So we had trouble getting through the gate. So luckily somebody else was coming. We were able to get a hold of them and everything worked out. But we could have been 2 hours outside of an area and didn't have keys to get through a gate. So thinking about that. Okay. More times than I dare to count, I have been flying late night. I've been flying early morning. I've changed my shoes at the airport before I got on the plane. Sometimes still caked in mud, so I always carry a little plastic bag with me in my suitcase to stick my muddy boots in. Things like that. It happens. And you want to know what your policies are. Do you get paid for traveling late at night, or are you only getting paid an 8-hour day? It's a question to ask. Make sure you get the right vehicle. If you're going off-road or you're hauling a bunch of stuff, you need to make sure you got the right things for that. Ask your client for recommendations is a good tip, because especially local small areas that you tend to find, they know, they understand, they constantly are having people come in doing work for them on bigger bases or bigger plants, and they often have specific special rates that they can get. So ask about that. Tool bags. Tool bags are important. Inspection bags, however you want to call them, go bags, sometimes they're called. But you definitely want to be checking and making sure that you get everything you need, and even maybe a few things that you might not need. But you don't want to go overboard. If you go overboard, you're going to be lugging a lot of extra stuff. But at the same time, if you get there and you say, gee, I really wish I had a hammer, it's tough to go get another hammer. Okay. If you're already on a site, on a base or whatever, yeah, you might be able to go pick one up at lunchtime or something like that. But you got to be thinking about that. Okay. So think about what you will need and what you might need. And then, if you're flying, maybe scale back a little bit. If you're driving, throw a few extra things in, that kind of stuff. Batteries do run out, so I tend to have multiple batteries for most things. And then my modern world that we are now living in, inspections, investigations are not going to end just because, we'll end for a short time, but with coronavirus, at some point we got to get on with our business, and we're just going to have to figure out how to work with it. So we're starting to do that now. I'm seeing it more and more, where we're having policies, where you can sign up and have trackers and that kind of stuff of where people are at, getting exceptions to policies, if you will. But then at the same time, you want to have your extra masks, your hand sanitizers, things like that. All right. Airlines, more times than not, I've never gotten a tool confiscated, but I've come close. So I will tell you that, anything, obviously hammers and knives, things like that are obvious ones that you have to check. But did you know that if it's a tool longer than 15 centimeters or 7 inches, if you go in the into the US world, the CONUS world, generally about 7 inches and longer, they can confiscate that. So even if it's not a dangerous thing, they consider it basically something you can swing and hit people with, I guess. Cartridges for inflatable life vests. So there's a type of life vest that automatically inflates if you hit water, and it contains a CO2 cartridge. So 1, maybe 2, most of the sites will allow you to do that. If you check their airline rules, they'll allow you to do that, but you get more than that and you're not going to be allowed to do that. Spray paint, you're never allowed to bring onto a plane. So that's where you go to the hardware store on that. My personal preference is I do duffel bags. Number one is most of the job sites that I'm at from inspections, they're old plants. You're going up and down stairs, narrow corridors, things like that. The wheels don't really help you out much when you're doing that, right? So you just end up carrying it. Well, a backpack and a duffel bag generally is easier to carry than some big old heavy plastic crate for that. A lot of people do provide the hard-sided crates. They feel it protects their equipment better, things like that. But most of the equipment that I'm carrying around, it can be beat up and doesn't really hurt. So you want to be thinking about what kind of bag you have. I personally would also say don't get the big company logo on your bag, and that's just because as I travel throughout airports all over the world, I see them, and if I'm a thief, I know there's really expensive equipment in those things, and I'm going to take it, So I tend to try to blend in, a little operational security, and try to not be the obvious target. Make somebody else the obvious target. Go rob my competitor, One thing on the right side here you'll see is there's a little small bag, some people call it a little man bag or a little side patch satchel. I have found that little bags like this, especially when I'm hanging off of a dam, is nice for carrying your stuff and keeping it near you, but yet your hands are free. So within the big bag, I carry little bags basically. In terms of tools, the biggest one on this one I'm going to say is get a really good flashlight and a really good camera. Those are the two things you're going to use the most. Tape measures, things like that. I don't get fancy tape measures because they tend to go in nasty holes and dark, muddy, dirty things that are going to just destroy them. So I don't get expensive equipment on the tape measures, the calipers, things like that. They're going to get damaged, so there's no point in doing that. What you want to prioritize instead is something that you can easily read on a tape measure and on a picture, which I'll show you in just a second. But you want to emphasize that first. Do not forget the first aid kit. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but accidents do happen. Hands get cut, little bumps and bruises and scrapes happen, and having a first aid kit is important. You definitely want that. Okay. Other specialty tools, though, I tend to throw these in at times when I know I'm going to need them, but obviously I don't carry them every time. A rebar locator if I'm trying to do concrete and I don't know quite, like maybe I don't have the best drawings and I don't know what the spacing of the rebar is, for instance, and you're just in a wall or a slab somewhere it's not horribly congested. A rebar locator, which is this yellow zircon, That's a rebar locator. Many different companies make them. Laser measuring devices are important and good if you got to do a lot of as-builts or a lot of checking to make sure that things are okay. Or if you're doing in an old existing facility that you have zero drawings on, they're important. Spotlights. Spotlights can be valuable when you're trying to see above ceilings on acoustical ceilings. When you're down in a tank and reservoir and you're trying to see the ceiling, for instance, and the ceiling's 50 feet away and your camera's just not going to get it. So that's where a spotlight works well. Borescopes is a piece of equipment some people aren't familiar with. A borescope basically is a little camera on a thin rope, if you will, wire, and you stick it through a hole underneath a little crevice, somewhere like that, and you can see behind it. Usually they got a little light on them. I've used them many different times for down anchor holes or underneath pieces of equipment, bases, things like that. So I do mention rope access gear, but I'm going to tell you that if you're not trained to use rope access gear, don't do it. All right, slide 30. If you're in the field, now we're finally in the field. So smell that sweet taste of freedom, I say. And like I say, sometimes it's a totally different environment when you get outside of an office and nice and quiet and everything. You get out to the field and all of a sudden there's noise and there's wind and all this other stuff. Just remember, you are usually the most important and exciting thing happening on site that day. People also notice that person's not normally here. So that creates a lot of attention. And because it creates a lot of attention, you need to act accordingly. Leave your bad attitudes, any little beefs or tips you got with your teammates at the gate. Okay, any office politics, whatever. Put it aside. If you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't go. Will save your company's reputation more times, and it'll hurt it many more times if you have problems. Okay, be nice. Effectively is the main thing. There's usually are delays. You'll show up in the gate and they'll go, "Who are you again?" And you'll be like, "I'm so-and-so from Black & Veatch." Who? And then at some point they get on the phone, they call. I've had people pull project managers out of meetings before trying to get me through the gate. And generally they're trying to be nice. They're trying to be good. They have rules, they have laws that they have to follow. They don't want to get in trouble. Just be understanding, be patient. It happens. Okay. I prefer to conduct a toolbox talk, what I call toolbox talk, which is like a mini safety meeting right at the beginning. And basically it's checking to say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. If this happens, I'm going to go do this. We're going to check to make sure that this is locked out. If I scream, oh crap, then that, means something, that kind of stuff. So it also allows you to look at the actual situation. Maybe when you last saw the site or the information you got in some picture or whatever showed that there was a piece of equipment over here that's no longer there, or there was a ladder that just isn't worth it. You can't climb down it. I was down in Puerto Rico once, and we thought we were going to use these ladders to get down a wet well that's about 7 floors deep. And the first time I got down the ladder, it was very rusted, and I was like, okay, obviously I'm not getting on this. And then to see how it was, I took and gave it a good shake, and I ripped half the ladder off in my hand. So obviously we weren't going down ladders. So in that case there, I had a backup plan, and I went down on ropes through an access shaft and all that business, because otherwise the entire trip to Puerto Rico would have been a waste, except for the beach, of course. But it would have been a waste from a project perspective. So I always say pause, observe, then proceed. And that's because as you look at things, you can kind of set yourself for the day. You can get your rough plan, you can get your directions, you find anything's different, and then you move on. Okay. As I said before, be nice. That's a key thing. Okay. Even when you get off site, when you go off site for lunch, you definitely want to make sure that like the locals, they all know each other. You get servers more times than not. You show up to the local diner. There may only be 1 or 2 diners in the town. You show up and the guy goes, "Oh, y'all down over at the plant today?" And yes, ma'am. And, "Oh, well, say hi to Bubba," or something, whatever. Okay. It happens. And more times than I'm amazed. But be aware of that. Also be aware of other work being performed on site. Coordinate with others. Even if the other group isn't playing nice, you play nice. That's the thing. Okay. Also be careful what you say about your findings. Everyone remembers what you say, and they may overhear it. You may not have said it to them. They just may have overheard it. So if you walk into an area and go, "Dang, that's messed up," somebody's going to remember that. Okay. And it may not be an actual problem, but all of a sudden in their mind, it became a problem. Okay. Also, it isn't sunny and 20 degrees outside. Okay. It gets cold, it gets hot, and you need to pack for that. Plan for it. Slips, trips, and falls can be a serious safety hazard. As we say, walk like a penguin. Use ice cleats, yak tracks, whatever you need. And there's days where you just can't do it. I've gotten to a site in Indiana once. I got up to a water tank, and I got a picture actually here at some point. I'll point it out. But I got up there, got to the top, and there was a sheet of ice on it, and we're like, nope, can't do that. So luckily, it was a 2-day inspection. Luckily, by the second day, we were able to get a crane out there, and we were able to look at the areas that we couldn't get to the first day with a different method. But this is not the time to be macho and brave. Okay, understand your body. I do always like to include the picture on the bottom right, on slide 33, by the way, because this is the one time I would say that I truly did not listen to my own advice. This was down in Puerto Rico again. It's very hot, very humid, and I was doing scroll case inspections for turbines for a water plant, or for a hydropower plant rather, and climbing in very tight holes that hadn't been operated since 1989 when Hugo came through. And so I was the only engineer, the only structural guy on the site at the time. I had a whole support team behind me. I had the paramedics from the local fire crews were there, everything like that. So I felt like I got to get this done, right? And I'll tell you, there's three different scroll cases, and after the second one, my body was cramping up. I was, dehydrated. I was getting hot, things like that. And rather than saying, you know what, we need to stop, I need to take a break, I pushed on through. And so that's why I have a goofy look on my face, because normally my face doesn't look that goofy alone, but not that goofy. And that's why it has a goofy look, because I will tell you, I was beat. I was probably a little bit of heat exhaustion. So don't do that. I messed up. Okay, avoid the shining objects. That is my tip for when you're trying to go and find what is wrong in a room. You generally want to be disciplined. Okay, a disciplined approach is your best approach, because it will help you out so much later when you try to do a report and you're not just have this bunch of random pictures of everything starts looking the same. Oh, was that pipe in that room or was it over in this other room? I don't remember. And trust me, the plant people remember. So when they look at your report and you say it was over in building A or room B or whatever, and well, that wasn't there, that's actually over here, they'll immediately discount the rest of your report. You lose credence, you lose a reputation. So it's best to be disciplined and make sure that you're getting facts. Okay. So if you see something that is shiny though, don't go over to it. Just, ooh, what's that? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, I'll make a note of that, mentally note it or write it down, and come back to it when I can, once I get done with what I'm doing. Okay. So with that said, I have kind of the how do I clear a room approach. And what I call is clearing a room is when you're inspecting a bunch of rooms, you tend to want to go through and check various things out of room. So in large facilities, things do tend to look the same. So first and foremost, I take a picture of the room number prior to entering the room. And then every picture after that, before the next room number picture, is of that room. So therefore, everything in that room, I don't have to remember that this picture is in that room, because I can just scroll back until I find the room number and then I know it's in that room. Okay. I work the room in a very organized manner. I personally, and everybody does it differently, but I personally start and work clockwise at the door, and then I go around the perimeter and then I work towards the middle. It doesn't always work though, because sometimes the room is really odd shaped, or there's things in your way, you can't get around, whatever. There's different things. So you do need to be flexible, but in a general pattern, that's what I do. Also, a lot of people, structurals don't to do this, but other people may forget to look up. There's a lot of information of things hanging from the ceilings and other pipes and conduits and cable trays and everything else around there. So don't forget to look all around. Most people don't forget to look down, but they forget to look up. Okay. When you are documenting a piece of equipment, so say a transformer, for instance, what do you want to look at in a transformer? Usually you want to take a picture of the actual transformer, standing back a little way so you can see the whole transformer. That gives you an idea of what condition it is and things like that. But you want the nameplates, any anchorage, for a transformer, what conduit is connected to it, what voltage it is, all these kind of things, all these pieces of information. Is it grounded? Do you see the anchorage? Because sometimes transformers aren't anchored, but sometimes they are, but it's kind of underneath. So that's where a borescope or a good strong flashlight help you get a better picture of the anchors. Okay, there are times where your access is just tough, and that's, by the way, slide 36. This is in the bottom left photo of the tank there. That's the case where we got to the top and literally it was just a sheet of ice. And we just said, we need there a buckle at the top of there. You can kind of see the buckle if you look in fairly close. Basically, they had sucked the tank in because the bird screens had got iced over and they sucked the tank in, negative pressure. So they had buckled it. And we were looking at that amongst some other things. Luckily on that one there, we were able to get a crane and a man basket and we were able to go complete it rather than climb off. We were going to do rope inspection off the side, but it was just too slick on the top to do it safely. The top one is a ladder that I'm on that is, again, it was a very small dam, easily accessed spillway. Could I do a full rope inspection? Yeah, but it just isn't needed. And it's safer to not do that if you don't have to do it. So I have a ladder that was, 20-foot ladder or whatever, nice heavy duty one. And I tied the ladder off, climbed up, did my inspections, and I did it faster, safer, and cheaper. And that's a good thing. So small changes can make a big difference though. Make sure you don't need a set of keys to get through some doors, for example. Somebody on every plant knows where the skeletons are hidden on that plant. And find that person. That's my recommendation on that. Okay. Boom lifts, man lifts. Don't be afraid to ask for them on big projects. They really do help. They can save time as long as you get the operator training and the fall protection on that. And then also ask yourself the question if you need to get there or just a camera. More times than not, once you do enough inspections, you kind of get a feel for what something is just based on looking at it. You don't really need to touch it. So there's times where maybe you don't need to actually physically get there and touch. Maybe you just need to see a picture of it. Okay, so in that case there, I'll show you later here, you can have a camera on a rope and it works just great. Okay, I prefer 3 different types of field documentation. And the reason why is if you lose one, you didn't lose your whole game. Okay, so I generally write some notes. I take a lot of photos. I take a bunch of photos. Digital's cheap. Okay, I'll get there later. Memory is absolutely dirt cheap. And then I do videos because videos capture things that you might miss on photos. So between all 3 of those things, I got redundancy. And that's what I want because I don't want to spend a lot of money getting me to a particular location, often very far off the beaten path, only to lose my camera. I dropped it down a hole. I have before, I will tell you, I've dropped some stuff. Okay. And most of my stuff is on lanyards and little cords and it's hanging off stuff. But generally, you don't want to lose your stuff if you can avoid it. But if you do, you want to have backups. Okay. Also, if you have a big investigation or it's out in the sticks somewhere, you definitely want to have more than one camera. Do not use your personal cell phone cameras. Number 1, more times than not, that's not allowed or not permitted for security reasons. And number 2, your company's not going to reimburse you if you lose your nice Samsung phone. Okay. Few photo taking tips. As I say, photos. I love photos. Most people, anybody that knows me knows that I take a lot of photos. And the reason why is because it tells the story. Okay. The trick is though, if you're going to take a picture, too many times I've seen people take a nice close-up picture of a measurement of a piece of rebar, for example, such as the center of the picture on slide 38. However, that tells you nothing. It really means nothing because it doesn't have context. So what you forgot and missed there was the picture standing further away. So you want to take the picture standing further away so you get the context. So for example, in the one I show on the screen, by seeing on the left side, I can see that the deterioration really starts up. This happens to be a hydrogen sulfide problem in a wet well for a wastewater plant. It's a wet well, hydrogen sulfide forms sulfuric acid on concrete and it eats away the concrete basically. But it tends to form only at the water line where there's oxygen and air and things like that. Well, if you saw the picture on the right, you're going to think, oh my God, the whole thing's bad. But instead, it really is just one area and then it gets better. So that tells the story if I have the bigger context. Autofocus, autoflash, they do work well. Like I said, distance shots in a roof of a wet well are tough. That's where a spotlight can help you. I'm also going to show you the rope on a camera on a rope here in a minute. That usually helps well too. I recommend landscape photos because if you do the mostly landscapes, it helps better for reports. Okay, and everybody likes a nice big picture for marketing. Okay, I'm going to skip most of this here, but basically don't forget to practice using your camera ahead of time. You want to take straight on photos if you have tape measures in them, because then you can measure that later electronically. For instance, on the bottom right, you can see the cylinder, and I can tell you that one spot there is 45 millimeters long because I can measure it from the tape measure off the field. Otherwise, I would have had to write that down somewhere and all that. Don't get people in your pictures either. That's one thing. Do not get people in your pictures if you can all avoid it, and especially avoid faces and badges. All right, this is my camera on stick trick, and basically selfie sticks. But this, I've been doing this way before selfie sticks were invented. In fact, I probably missed out on an opportunity for a good patent. But sometimes selfie sticks aren't long enough, so you can go get like a 20-foot painter's pole. I've used those. Broom handles, pieces of rebar, any junk laying around the site. And on the underside of most cameras, you will find a quarter 20 thread for the tripod mount. And the tripod mount is a quarter 20 thread. That's a US metric or US number, so you may have a little trouble getting it overseas. But between that, a hose clamp, which is the stainless steel clamp on the bottom picture, and a screwdriver, you can turn anything into a longer selfie stick. Okay, just turn your timer on, turn your focus on, turn your flash on, and digitally you can rotate it upside down. I've also take and use a GoPro mount and a GoPro, and you can even work a GoPro with an app on your phone, so you can turn it off, turn it on, turn the videos, things like that. So all that works well. This is a trick for using how to keep track of repetitive things. So for example, on these gates here, there's 4 gates. Okay, it has to be gates 1, 2, 3, and 4. How do you know if you're taking a picture of, so on this one here, this left side over here, I'm using my left hand and I have the number 3. I take a picture of my left hand with number 3 showing, so I know I'm on gate 3 left side. Okay. And at that point, every picture from there until I show gate 3 right side, usually is what I would do next. Every picture of that is of that side. So no matter what, I can go back 10 years later and I still know when I took the from the gate 3 left side. I know that because I documented it in pictures. Okay. So, and then this is just one I always just say, how would you document this tank? You know, personally, it's a very good grid system. So I would set up a grid if it didn't already have one of, of alphanumeric, and then everything between, I would have corners. So like 4 faces, I would do a face A, B, C, D or something like that, or north, south, east, west faces. And then I could document damage and things like that off of that. That's how I would generally do it. Video documentation, you want to use your videos to supplement pictures and notes, because they help catch areas that your pictures miss. Because how often have you looked to the side of your screen wishing that it was just another inch over so you could see something? Okay, videos can get you there. At the same time, they help you jog your memory. I will tell you that lawyers love videos. So my warning on videos is be quiet. I tend to try to stick to the obvious facts. Like as I'm looking at something, I'll be like, okay, I'm in room yada yada. I'm looking at the north wall, for instance. I don't say, wow, that thing looks like a mess, or man, that looks pretty good. Or that's a minor crack, probably not a problem. Because you never know if your analysis later on might change. And when it changes, now you've got on video preliminarily saying that that's a problem, and a lawyer will use that up if there's an actual problem later on. Okay. Also warn others around you prior to taking that video, because too often, I can't tell you how many times I've heard cuss words and other things that shouldn't be said on a video be said. So warn others. It's just common courtesy, number 1. Number 2, it helps your videos later on. 21st century, we have a lot of tablets. Most time now on modern job sites, you will see tablets if security rules allow. There are many places security rules will not allow. So if they don't, that's okay. You got your other methods. But if they do, it helps you document in a faster, easier, quicker way. The only trick, again, is you don't want to put all those eggs in one basket, and if you lose your tablet, you've lost your entire inspection. So that's where cloud services can work. One thing we like to do, we use a program called Bluebeam Studio, but then there's all sorts of video streaming softwares and things like that work. And the advantage is you now have the power of everybody in your home office that you can possibly reach if you find something weird that you don't know what you're looking at. You can call up and say, hey, George, have you ever seen this before? Or Mary, this thing looks funny. Did they pipe that thing backwards? And somebody can go and look at a drawing somewhere. They can pull up stuff. They can help you out. So you now just expanded your teamwork crew without all the cost and headache of getting them to the site. Something to think about. All right. Final ending of the area is the reports and follow-up. Slide 44, now slide 45. How do you report your stuff? Again, you can have the best inspection, the best investigation in the world, but if you can't communicate what you found, it's worthless. It's junk. And so you want to be able to write effectively, but at the same time, write to your audience and your client's audience. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've seen bad reports that just somebody wrote a bad report. I get involved at the back end because now they got to write another report to clean up the first report. I've had a case where one company came in and did an investigation of some gates, and they were not qualified to do the investigation. And their normal work happened to be on the rest of the site. And somebody said, "Hey, could you go down and look at this?" And they said, "Sure," and went looked at it and wrote a report. Well, they literally are like, "Oh my God, this thing's so bad. Don't lift the gate up. Don't just lock it out." Well, the problem is that actually increased the load on the gate and such that it was getting ready to start flooding. And the water load on the gate was so high that it's like you're actually better off to get the gate to one time very slowly, lift the gate up out of the water to get it out of the damn water so it doesn't fail. So that way you can lower the reservoir to get down to where it needed to be. So that's a case where somebody wrote a report they shouldn't have written. And then not like myself, I came back in and back in and I'll clean that up. Always provide your client with draft copies. Number one, it limits surprises because they've got bosses, they've got people they report to, and they need to understand and prepare. If you walk into a thing, you just thump down a report that basically just says, okay, this is all junk. Now they've got to do some explaining, and they need time for that. I'm not saying to modify your findings based upon that, but at the same time, give them and talk to them, give them a chance and talk to them. The other thing is, as I said before, do you need a full memo or do you need just a little tech memo, something like that? I personally am a fan of tech memos where they're applicable. There's certainly a good case for full documentation. It's needed sometimes, it's required at other times, but when you don't need that and it's only just some little simple problem or whatever, I like a tech memo. Tech memos tend to be about 3 or 4 pages of well-written text, usually covering at the top end of how you talked to yada yada, you got there, you did it safely, you conducted it on this day at this time, you interacted whatever this thing, and then you go into what you did, and then you go into your findings. Sometimes their findings are even just bullet point lists. They're not even paragraph form. And then I tend to include a lot of pictures. Again, I love pictures, but I truly believe pictures tell the story. And 10 or 15 pictures, especially if you annotate them, you start putting little text, you point to this and say, this is a radial arm, this is where it's damaged, this is where the corrosion's at. That can instantly tell the story. Okay. You don't even need to describe it. The average person can see and say, that looks messed up. Okay. If you do a full report, think executive summary, findings, recommendations, conclusions, things like that. Okay. Avoid dramatic language and don't ever say something very dramatic unless you truly mean it, because you're going to need to live by that. Okay. All right. So I'll skip most of this here, but basically investigations can be fun. I personally enjoy them. I do a lot of them and I enjoy them. And so, but safety is priority. If you do a lot of office prep, that goes a long way. After you do a bunch of them, you tend to kind of figure out what you need to do and what you don't need to do. But generally, so experience does help, but generally you want to do some office prep at always. And then you want to be very disciplined in your approach. So with that, Ms. Charisse, I'm not sure. I think I'll escape out of that maybe. And there we go.
Hey, Larry, that was fantastic. My gosh. I thank you so much for taking the time to share these really practical tips with us. Obviously this is something you've learned, hopefully not always the hard way, but through so many years of experience. And there's really nothing that can replace that experience, but you can at least help others, avoid pitfalls that you've encountered and found your way around. So I think what you shared with us is just truly invaluable. And I'm glad we've got it recorded, because I bet there's a lot of people that maybe haven't even arrived, say, to USACE yet, or other organizations that are going to be out in the field that can benefit from watching this before they head out themselves. One thing I really loved, and I know USACE will love, your emphasis on safety, consistently emphasizing that, which is really good. And also the other thing, of course, is communication. You really brought that home time and time again, about the different ways that we have to communicate in your work, and just how critical it is to not assume someone understands something, make sure it's clear to them every time. We've got about 9 minutes before we have to wrap up, so we probably have some questions from some people. I'm going to just ask, though, while I got the floor still, a question. I mean, do you have, I bet you got a million stories. Do you have kind of that one thing it's like, it's my most memorable time something happened that you just wouldn't believe kind of thing? Do you have any of those?
Quick war. Yeah. Okay. Quick war story. And I touched upon it in my presentation, where we showed up and we went down, and we were in Puerto Rico, and there was an inlet shaft, and it was 7 floors deep, about 150 feet down in total. And literally climbed down the first rung of the stairs, and everything was fine. You get down there, and literally I just pulled the ladder, and literally the ladder pulled off in my hand. And I'm like, whoa, what the hell? So understanding at this point, it was November time frame. I'm coming from a colder climate, going to a very warmer climate. So at that point, I got sinus issues at times, and I developed problems speaking. You know, my voice was starting to go, right. And so I'm on a radio. Eventually I get on a rope, and I'm going on a radio down, and they're lowering me down on it, because on that case there, they had a tripod, and I had my normal climbing gear, and they said, no, we want to lower down the tripod, it's safer. I said, okay. Well, at the bottom, you have to change over from when you're rope climbing, you have to change over from descent to ascent. And I was trying to do that, and they're all trying to lift me up, and with the thing, and I'm on the radio trying to tell them, hold, wait, and they weren't understanding me, because it was also very echoey in a tight confined space there. It's very echoey, and so I'm trying to do that. In the meantime, I took and was jerking, and I knocked my my air meter off, and it's still down in the bottom of the hole somewhere. It just started going off down the hole, and I said, oh well, it was an old air meter anyways. I helped safety out and got rid of it for them. But you know, so things do happen, and at the same time, you got to be willing to adjust, but always be safe. You know, and that wasn't a condition where it would have been unsafe. If they had just pulled me up, I just wouldn't have had my secondary. I always try to have two means of support in case the first one goes. Against safety, you never want to be hanging on one rope. You always want to have a backup rope.
Right.
So
I'm sure that was memorable.
Yeah, got my attention.
Good. But you've survived to tell about it, which is great. Yeah. Good. Well, that's good. Does anyone else in the audience have a question? Larry?
Hey, Margaret, it's Mike Urbach. I do have a question. Larry, you talked a little bit about the safety requirements, depending on whether it's, you know, host nation and U.S. or UFC. How do you go about determining if you're working, let's say, in Poland or someplace else, Oconus, and how do you go about finding those host nation safety requirements?
So, like for places like Poland, for example, we've done enough work in that we actually would have the norms for that area. But generally, your client is going to have those, especially if you're like, sometimes when you're working on a U.S. base, the host nation standards don't matter because the client's going to be going, you're on U.S. soil, you know, and it just doesn't matter. But more times than not, you're on a NATO base or some joint base or something like that. But at that time, somebody usually has them. At that point, communication. So for the other area, by the way, is online. You can usually do a little bit of research online. You can find that. I personally, I can tell you, like Romania, for example, they basically mirrored the U.S. standards. Poland has a few little quirky things, like if you're on a roof, for instance, in the U.S. codes, once you're 6 feet away from the roof, and most companies would even give you after 10 feet, you don't need to be tied off in a harness. Poland doesn't have that same limitation. So if you're 100 feet from the edge of a roof, you still have to be tied off. And everybody kind of looks at that and says, yeah, that's silly and goofy, but that's the rule. So, you know, at that point, you got to figure out how you're going to get a tie-off point on a roof that's not normally designed for it, because we normally wouldn't need to be tied off for it. So you just have to know these little quirks. And again, your local contacts, the internet, local base, things like that, they generally help you with that.
Thanks. Very informative. Thank you.
Cool.
Hey, Larry, this is Sharice. I have a question. You know, what is one thing that you wish you had in your go bag that most people wouldn't think of? What's one thing that most people don't think of that ought to be in your go bag?
Most people don't think of. Probably several towels. I would say that, you know, most people understand tools. They don't understand things get sweaty and dirty and stuff. And you won't want to be, first of all, you don't want to be wiping your face with a dirty, you know, muddy towel or something that's been in wastewater, for example. But at the same time, you don't want to be so there's times where you can cover a pipe or something, because if you've never been inside of a water tank, they get even clean water. You probably wouldn't drink water if you've seen what I've seen in some tanks. And so I would say a towel, because then you're covering it up. Most people don't forget the flashlights and the tape measures and hammers and things like that. But it's the weird things. The other item I would say is the first aid kit. Too often I see people thinking the operational, not the safety. So don't forget the first aid kit.
Good one.
And again, it doesn't have to be very big, just the basics,
Do we maybe have one more question before we got to close out? Okay, yeah. Well, we are at the end of our session here. I'll turn it back over to you, Sharice, and thank you so much, Larry.
Yep, Sharice is on mute though. You're on mute, Sharice.
Oh.
Not anymore. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, Larry, thank you so much for this presentation. It was very informative, very detailed, a lot of really good tips. We do appreciate that. And I want to thank everybody for joining. Don't forget, if you want a PDH certificate, just send an email to Lindsay Edwards. This session was recorded, and we'll get it posted to the website before the end of the week. The slides are on the website, and the post announcements in case you missed some of the upcoming events. So thank you everyone for joining. You have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Sharice and Margaret.
Thanks.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. Good job. Thanks, Sandra.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Later, vedere, pa. Bye-bye. Ciao.